Well, Matthias
Matthias,
left us today. So where
yeah,
is he?
he did. Matthias is not here today doing the dances around the pole. And if you can
Midsummer,
imagine,
Swedish
yeah,
midsummer.
exactly. That's what Matthias
And we're
does.
stuck here on computers looking at each other, talking about tech.
Yes. Well,
Always.
I'm gonna have my San Juan on Monday night. It's like I'm in Spain, and it's a big thing here. It's like a midsummer, but on a different day.
But no poles, no hopping around poles.
No poles, but some beach,
Yeah.
like the party on the beach, fireworks, a lot of music.
Well, in Denmark, we only, put a big bonfire on the
It's
water,
just fires,
and we're
fires and
happy.
witches.
Let's burn everything.
All right. So with this cultural insight, shall we dive in? Welcome to the
so
DevSecOps talks with Andrei,
Paulina,
and Cole.
and we got
for the
special guest
first
today.
time. Yes.
Yeah, nice to see you all.
Thank you for
Would you
joining
like
us,
to
Cole.
jump? Sorry.
It's good to be here. I was going to get a coffee about half an hour ago, and on my way there, I was listening to podcast number 80, I think it was, on passkeys last week or a little while ago. I learned so much about passkeys. I know now never to use SMS for 2FA, even though that is what every single 2FA device I have is set up to use. So there's a lot of work going ahead for me. So thank you all.
Going forward, something to consider. But should we jump all the way into our introduction and know more about you? Can you tell us the story?
I will try and make it short because it's not that interesting probably, but I'm Cole. I'm originally from the US. I've been doing DevOpsy, SRE stuff for 10 or 11 years. Actually, I think the first way I got into it was I was having this really hard time deploying my app as a back-end engineer, and this person, I was at a coffee shop, and this person, we had this conversation. I was trying to get some help with it. He told me about this new and upcoming thing. I was very excited about it. It was called Docker. And I started diving in, and wow, it turns out this thing was pretty cool. And here we are, 11 years later.
Yes. And currently, you're not in US, I guess.
Currently, yes, thank you. Currently, I'm in Denmark. I've been here about 6 years. I've been working for companies like Pleo and Lego, and I have just started working as a freelance consultant, and that's
Exciting.
how Paulina and I initially met. She's been a great mentor to me.
Exciting. Topic of today. So we're going to be revising where OpenTofu is. We did, I think, a couple of episodes, and if I'm not mistaken, the last one was about a year ago, and also I think a month ago, OpenTofu turned a year or maybe more. So like after official release, and I think that's a good time to revise. Where are we with OpenTofu, how it's going, what's adoption rates, if it's something that people should be considering. I'm still on Terraform, so for better or worse, for the majority of the projects I'm involved with, I'm still in Terraform.
And then I think my role here is then to try and advocate and get you on board to OpenTofu within the next 30 minutes.
Well,
I
just to compare them, right?
Exactly. I'm also primarily on the Terraform, so I think we have, both sides of the here represented. So
yeah. And I will just say that I got my second PR into OpenTofu. It's my first contribution as a proper open source contributor to a primary, well-adopted product. So I'm very happy about it, and it's also been a really exciting kind of community to start interacting with.
Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about your involvement with community and how it was for you. What
and also, how did you get there?
How did you start with OpenTofu? Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So I'll start. My a little bit more about my background is I've been doing Terraform for, I don't know, 7 or 8 years or something like that. And maybe 2 years ago or 3 years ago, news started coming out about Terraform, and I started learning about the company behind it, HashiCorp, and the founder of HashiCorp, Mitchell Hashimoto. And shortly after I started learning about all of this, I started to realize that I actually have a really big passion for this company, HashiCorp. They're a private company, yes, but they're building open source projects that I have been using sort of my whole career and didn't really think too much about, didn't really realize. And they're just doing it, and they're just giving it to us. And my entire career is based off of these tools. So I started to have sort of a personal, kind of feeling about how they're giving to our entire industry. And then almost immediately after that, this 2021 or something, Mitchell Hashimoto leaves HashiCorp. And there's not much news about why he wants to start his own thing again. Then about a year, maybe 2 years later, then IBM comes in, or 2 years after that, I think, then HashiCorp revokes the open source model, the open source license on Terraform, and makes it more strict on who can use it. And then a year after that, IBM swoops in and purchases HashiCorp. And we can talk about each of those topics in more detail. But to me, this evolution of this amazing company that's giving us all of this amazing tooling for free in so many senses, then moving to, I don't want to say too much about that. Moving to what it is right now, I'll say that, represents a really interesting, an interesting path that has led me to have certain feelings about OpenTofu and Terraform.
Right. I wanted to insert a small thing there. I think it's also important to mention that, yes, they were private, but before acquisition of IBM, they also went public. And then all the licenses shenanigans started after they went public. And I think many people could say that, as soon as the company goes public, there is a lot of focus on the maximizing all the profits, saying they have to report it now. And in case of HashiCorp, they had their cash cow with Vault. So Vault, if you ever ask them for the license, it's expensive, and it's not a cheap tool. And I always felt that Terraform was like a side project for them because they wasn't really making much money out of it. I mean, they had like attempt to build Terraform Cloud, but they had much more success with productization of Vault and then also console. Like when you start to do advanced networking, then you need to have a console enterprise. And the Terraform was always a little bit on the side, and I guess they just tried to look for the revenue areas, like saying, okay, we're not getting much of here. What could we do? Let's try to squeeze it a little bit more. Plus, another dynamic, they started to get quite a competition to Terraform Cloud.
Yeah.
As you know, Terraform Cloud is kind of expensive, and you had all other companies offering similar capabilities. So you had Atlantis open source project. They kind of acqui-hired it, so they hired the person behind the project. But there was like Spaceleaf, M0, and I think a couple of more. And I believe those companies were the driving force behind OpenTofu science.
Yeah, exactly.
They would be in a breach of the license with the tools they're using. They're running Terraform, and then like BSL license that Terraform adopted prevented them from using future versions of Terraform. So they had to do something, and that gave us OpenTofu.
And yeah, it's been quite the journey. And just like you said, a lot of these companies, Spacelift, M0, they're now the sponsors of OpenTofu. So what that means in practice is that each of these companies has decided to contribute a certain amount of money by hiring developers into this community. So as a contributor now, I think there are about 20. I can see there's something around 20 core contributors within the project, and they are hired by specific companies, but their entire job is to work on the open source code for OpenTofu.
They're basically on the salary within like Spacelift, but they work on OpenTofu.
Right.
I think like if you're assessing any kind of open source project, that's important since you want to have stability and long-term survivability of the project. And it's important there is a funding, so there is not only the enthusiasm of a community, but there is also willingness to invest, especially when you're trying to build something as big and popular that is comparable to Terraform. I think they had to figure out a lot of technical challenges to get to the parity level. Like I think like registry was very complicated to do, so it's backward compatible with Terraform, and I mean they want to make the migration as easy as possible.
And that I can't even imagine how much work they had to do in those initial few months. I mean, just like replacing all the references, because now, it has to become HashiCorp independent. So replacing everything across that entire code base and making sure it still compiles. I mean, it's crazy the amount of work that I can imagine.
I think it's crazy amount of work, and I think that also helps that the responsibility is shared not only in one company, but you have multiple contributors and multiple both independent contributors and companies which chipping in with it. So
yeah,
we can also mention that the OpenTofu became CNCF project, which also important from the governance perspective. So it's now governed by the rules of CNCF, which kind of takes a little bit of control out of those companies paying in, but it's also good because CNCF has established a way of driving open source tool adoption. So when something
exactly, so you have certain standards kept up to.
Yes, when something becomes part of CNCF, it's in a good track. It's not guaranteed that it will graduate, but it's in a good track to become something.
And so I guess I'm part of my relationship to then OpenTofu is kind of looking at that history of HashiCorp and that closure and the focus on, I think just the way you put it, Andre, perfect about it going public. The focus on the profitable aspect. That in the last year, that's kind of been weighing on me a little bit. And then I think it's almost felt a little bit personal with IBM, this massive company, then coming in and purchasing it, and me having to say kind of goodbye to HashiCorp as the way I knew it. And so I started, interacting with OpenTofu and trying to understand how this new product, which is just a fork, how do they work internally? And for the last 3 months, it's been phenomenal interacting with this community. 20 or so core maintainers, the few of which I've interacted with, the feedback mechanism has been so wonderful, and it's my first time interacting with such a big code base. I mean, this thing is, I think it's 15 years old. To be kind of guided into it gently by the core contributors has been so wonderful. So for anyone listening who has a few years of experience in something like Golang and is interested in contributing to an open source project, I can say that OpenTofu is a really solid community of welcoming core contributors.
What if we focus on your past experience, actually bringing OpenTofu to the real projects? Like, what was the driving force behind OpenTofu adoption? Because technically, as a company that is not in direct competition with HashiCorp, you can keep using Terraform.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a very unlikely that you will be considered being in breach of the license. I mean, that would send. I mean, it would be really bad precedent for the HashiCorp since then, like a lot of customers might reconsider, and they can actually drive more people to OpenTofu if they would go after one of the customers. So, but I guess you had some other reasons. So tell us all about it.
Yes. I think it kind of starts with what we've been talking about here, which is, as you can maybe tell, more my sort of ethical dilemma I was in. And that played a big part in the initial investigation into when I was working for a company about investigating OpenTofu. We're still on the Terraform early version of, this was shortly after the fork. And I think that happened in like .12 or something that they forked, that they went closed source with their model. So I was looking, what would this entail and what would it mean for the company if we were to adopt OpenTofu? And so we did a sort of hackathon, me and my team of like 6 or 7 engineers, I think, SREs. At that time, we had something like 70 or 80 GitHub repos. What would it mean for each of those repos to adopt OpenTofu in their infrastructure configuration? And really, all I can say is that it was incredibly simple. It was so painless to do so. And that was one part of it. It was the migration aspect, which was, as I said, totally pain-free. And then the other part was, what would we get in the future? And because at that moment, the two languages, the two OpenTofu and HashiCorp, they were Terraform, they were the same. At that point, they were totally the same language. But what OpenTofu promised to do shortly after they forked was fix this stupid bug that I had been running into for my entire career, which was the for loops. The for loops on Terraform has been so annoying ever since we started using them. I think you had to initialize a count variable, then you had to incorporate the count. I can't remember exactly how this works, but almost immediately after OpenTofu forked, they fixed this stupid bug and they allow just regular for each loops. And that, I think, was a really solid representation of why we as a company wanted to move and stay with OpenTofu.
What was it for providers? Because like by the time of they made the fork, you could use for each for models, you could use for each for
maybe
the resources.
It was specific to the provider. I mean, like we have discussed prior to this podcast. Yes, the for each, I think, is now pretty much the same, but for each on providers is also a really important aspect of making reusable code.
It's quite interesting because it's good that we have competition now. And if you look into the way how things are developing, you could see that HashiCorp still plotting its own path. So they're not as affected by what OpenTofu is doing. So they're not copying what OpenTofu is doing, but what OpenTofu is doing, creating the sense of urgency in HashiCorp. So they're starting to move and address certain things that they have been postponing or ignoring for a long time. And like, as you said, if you migrated right after the fork, then it was very easy. But then there are multiple areas that they actually took different ways of addressing. And the longer you wait, the more of those areas will be. So you would actually need to do some efforts to do migration. Like if you migrate now, like for instance, if you're running on the latest version of Terraform, and you're using certain features in Terraform that are not available in OpenTofu. Like, for instance, one example, which was, I think, a very big thing, and we talk about that many times, state encryption and generally like secrets in the state. So there was a long-running issue on Terraform asking them to enable, and they even had encryption with your own key before, but they actually disabled it for multiple reasons. One of them, I think, to push people to use HashiCorp Terraform Cloud, where the encryption was enabled, and not use your own backends. But then OpenTofu basically went and did it. I think they just brought the old code back. I haven't looked into it, that the HashiCorp removed, but now you could just encrypt with a KMS key. And it's very easy. HashiCorp actually went in another way. So they started to work on ephemeral values. So you can declare certain values as ephemeral, and then they're not preserved in state. It's kind of gets you to the same point. So like the problem you're trying to solve, you have a secret in the state that you don't want to be leaked. So you can either encrypt it and say like, check, done, it's encrypted, we don't care. But another way is to remove the actual value from the state, and like everything that you pass to the state is preserved there. I actually did a couple of experiments with ephemeral values, and it sounds good in a paper, but since you don't have a value in a state, you don't know when it's changing. So that kind of creates a tantrum for you. And the way they did it is they let you provide additional variable, like the value version, if you can think of this like this. So you have to pass something that represents a version of that value, and that's how you can trigger the changes.
Yeah, right.
So, and like update of this value instead of like rereading and updating it all the time. I don't.
Really interesting. Yeah.
It's kind of a little bit cumbersome. I tried to make it work. It kind of works when it doesn't. So it needs some love, but it's
and
an
so I guess
interesting step.
if you just use like something like date time as the associated tag or something, then
then you will change it all the time. So it's like a trigger. Yeah. So you could try to do like a hash of the value, but then it's not much better, because like you know the function you use, then you need to save the salt, and where do you put salt? So it is kind of complicated. I mean, like if you're reading it from, for instance, from SSM or Secrets Manager, you can try to get, like, for instance, SSM version, right? SSM gives you version numbers. Yeah, so there are those quirks. There are actually more things, right? So, like, another big thing that was always discussed, and like why TerraGrant exists in many ways, is the fact that the way how Terraform defines the backend, and it's not allowing the variables in the backend definition. And TerraGrant solves that through its clever trickery, and we discussed other ways of doing that. So I believe they actually now have early static evaluations that allows for the variables, locals, in model sources, in backend configuration. So that's quite interesting. And that should solve quite a bit of problems. So like if I am to migrate, and like if I would look for some features, I think that would be the one that I would be interested in. Yeah, because
why is that so? Yeah, what matters to you about that?
Well, look, so you want to have different backends. Imagine if you have development, staging, and production, right? Then you want to have your Terraform state for development stored in S3 bucket, which is in development. like I'm assuming you are on AWS, would work the same for other cloud providers. If you're staging, you have account, then you want to use bucket within staging account, but then it will be different name of the bucket, which is part of the backend configuration. And in Terraform, bucket configuration is static, which forces you to basically create a multiple directories, like that's my development, that's my mine.tf with my static backend configuration, but actually all the source code for the Terraform is in another directory, which we call shared, and it's kind of a shared model that we share between development, staging, and production. TerraGrant kind of does the same, like with a little bit different directory structure, but that's one of the primary reasons why TerraGrant exists. So they were like solving this problem and like the code duplication and everything because the static state configuration was driving it.
And some of the projects we had dynamic, our own handling of this thing to be able to make it dynamic with not multiplication of the code and repeating the same code, but dynamically change the directories for where do we store, the state files and so on, usually in the shared environments under different directories. But you still want to divide where you usually store for, production from the other environments to not get everyone to be able to manipulate it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We also had an approach with the dynamic keys. So you can, like, when you do Terraform init, you can actually pass all the keys of your backend as a CLI variable. So you can have empty backend configuration. So you just say S3 curly brackets, there is nothing in there, and you just pass the keys when you do Terraform init. That works, but then you need to have some kind of script that knows what those values are. We did that for multiple customers. It kind of works fine. It's easier and more straightforward than TerraGrant because like TerraGrant is becoming the beast on its own. And I think that the grant work is actually one of the companies behind OpenTofu and investing heavily in OpenTofu.
Yeah, I got something working similarly that we have, for example, default directory to dev, and then we have wrapper script, which can, change it to other non-production environment, or you have different parameter for if you do it for production environments. So, and that works pretty well. We were considering moving to some customers to TerraGrant, but we kind of gave up it because that works quite well with pretty simple script.
The most things that I think are interesting for OpenTofu that they have now is you have .tf files, right, for Terraform, but now I think they have something called tofu files that you can have next to your TF files. So then you could actually use the same code base with Terraform and OpenTofu and just put all the OpenTofu specific stuff into there. But that's kind of interesting.
Interesting. I have not used the tofu files, but that's a really interesting concept.
Yeah, I've seen
It would
them
make
announcing
migration
it.
even easier.
Yeah, exactly. So like if for some reason you need to keep it running in parallel, I guess tofu files might be the way to do it.
Yeah.
That's interesting. But then another thing is like there was a lot of development when it comes to the state file management. I mean, the way, like, for instance, import blocks. Like we got import blocks in Terraform. We have import blocks in OpenTofu. As far as I know, in OpenTofu, you can do for each on import and moved blocks. So you can iterate over them and have that dynamically. In Terraform, you cannot do that. And I think that might be similar issue as a backend configuration. So they don't support that early evaluation. I don't know. I'm just making it up right now, so
I think
don't take it for granted.
That sounds, from my memory, that sounds accurate. I guess I have a question that's sort of on the flip side of where we've been for a while, which is what in this conversation we have mentioned several I would perceive to be benefits of OpenTofu. What do you think keeps you on Terraform?
Well, Pauline, do you want to go first?
I think one thing is that, it became kind of market standard. So I think it's go-to for customers and, more developers and more people know it. So they know, for example, okay, if let's say I switch it to OpenTofu for the particular customer, if I'm gone, they can easier find someone who knows Terraform versus OpenTofu. At least that's one motivation which I heard from customers. I don't know, Andre, if you have a similar.
I think I shared it on the previous recording. So my approach is you have something that works. It's going to keep working, most probably, right? So don't fix what's not broken. That would be one. And the second, if you are to change something, you are looking for the high rate of return, right? So you would need to put some work into this. And
That's true.
you would
Also,
need
they
to
don't
have
want to
some.
spend too much.
Yeah, go ahead.
They don't want to spend time on stuff which don't really provide the value and bring anything as it works. I agree. I think they're usually trying to, okay, what is ROI on it?
Yeah, exactly. So you're looking for like 2-3-fold improvement into something, like a productivity changes, right? Something gets much better than before. Here, so far, still we are swapping one thing to another, and they're kind of the same. So there is no huge driving force behind it, right? So if IBM to come up tomorrow and say we're discontinuing Terraform, yeah, then you got to do something about that. But while it's keep maintained, while community is moving, while the security problems being addressed, then like there is no big reason. One big reason I could see is if you want to adapt one of those tacos tools that compete with Terraform Cloud. Those will force you to open tofu because you cannot use Terraform with them. So like if you are to
Not
adapt
quite,
Space
right?
Lift.
But I think that statement is not quite accurate because N0 Spacelift. It's true that they were in competition with Terraform Cloud, but I think they saw just how devastating that this choice is for them. So they're at least for M0, I can say you can be on M0 and still use Terraform now because
Right.
they've been paying HashiCorp or IBM, I guess. So you can still use Terraform and use many of the competing providers for CI/CD. It's just that they do sort of inherently want you to get off of Terraform.
Yeah, I see.
What about new projects? Would you choose Terraform or OpenTofu? Question to both of you.
I think for myself, I mean, my opinion is no secret here that I'm a OpenTofu fan at this point, and I absolutely hear what you're saying with projects that are already moving. It's almost like they're not quite different enough yet. OpenTofu is not far enough. It's not, it's not like Pulumi where you're talking about a totally different way to describe code. So I hear that the ROI is not that big, especially when there's, if you're a decent sized company, you have 100 or something repositories that are relying on the tofu on Terraform. But for new projects, I don't have much doubt that I would be using OpenTofu.
I would be open for experimentation, so I guess it's boils down to trying it out and seeing how it works. Because generally the devil is in details, so it will work the same in a 98% of the cases, and you want to know about those 2% where it's not going to work the same and what would be consequences of those. So I think for anyone considering, I think state encryption is a big thing. I mean, fiddling with values, trying to delete them from the state. Yeah, the general is a better approach. That you don't save the secrets in the state. I like that. I like the direction. I like the idea. but implementation is actually hard.
Mm-hmm.
So saying those values tend to spread around, and you might want to return them as outputs, and then it's getting messy very quickly. So they can still spread around and they can still be there, and you have to be very diligent. Like the encryption of the state is an more easier and understandable concept. If you're just getting the file from S3 and it's all gibberish, you cannot read it. If you don't have access to the key, it's much easier. You just do it and forget about it. Like deletion of the secrets from the state all the time, keeping that in mind. I don't see how it's going to scale, especially like if you will have developers interacting with that who are like not in Terraform experts. So that might be like one big selling point for me for OpenTofu. Another one would be dynamic backend configuration, like the state management for each. I don't care about that as much. I know Terraform did the way, so like with providers, I'm not sure if it's feature of the AWS provider itself, or is it a feature of the Terraform. So now when you're calling a provider, you can just specify the region where in the place where you're calling it. So you don't need to define a separate provider for every single region you're working with. You can just specify the region in the place where you call it and use the same provider. So like, I'm not sure if it's Terraform feature. I haven't tried it yet. They announced like a couple of months ago. It might be just a feature of the AWS provider. So then if it's only a feature of AWS provider, for each is still valuable for all other providers. If it's a feature of Terraform, yeah, it's probably just a feature of AWS provider. I don't think it's a feature of Terraform. It would be weird if they would do like the provider specific stuff in a core. So yeah, so for each still valuable, especially like if you have to deal with many providers and you need to create them dynamically.
I think that's wrapping up the discussion as we are slowly out of time. We learned a lot, both from Cole, from Andre, different perspectives, different opinions, different use cases, different points of view, what is important. So question to you also to leave some comments if you have different thoughts than any of us. Any final thoughts? And big thanks to Cole for joining us today.
It was so nice. Thank you both.
Likewise, enjoy your holiday and the weekend and midsummer and whatever it's called, the longest
In your
day
country.
in a year, whatever it's
Wianki.
called. Yeah, whatever it's called in your country. Enjoy the celebration if you celebrate, and we talk next time.
Bye.
Bye bye.
You have been listened to DevSecOps Talks with Matthias, Andre, and Paulina. For notes and information, please visit devsecops.fm. Thanks for tuning in.